Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast. Today we are on episode 55 and we are rejoined by a former guest who I will introduce in a minute. But first of all, if I can just welcome the usual co-hosts of Health Oddity, Mr. Peter Lant. How are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Oh, very nice of you to ask. I'm fine, thank you.
This is one of the things about introducing the podcast. You ask how everyone else is, right? But then you'd be sitting there like, oh, nobody bloody asked me. So I thought I'd ask you, you see? That's the way it goes. And I'm excited about this one.
Yes.
When we have guests on, and it's not cutting the conversation short, but at the end, we're like, oh, we'll talk about that. We'll have to get you back on and talk about that. And then they do come back on and we'll talk about the thing. It's great. And this is going to be like, when this guy was on the last time, it was fantastic. And we got some great feedback from it as well. So this is going to be a good one.
Excellent. And Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm good.
Paul is battling with some childcare issues today, but he's pushing through, and he's on the call, and we're doing the podcast, and he's all good. He's all set.
You won't get any gnomes walking past or anything, or children asking for bananas. It's okay. I've sorted that.
Okay.
What, you just give them a load of bananas, yeah?
Yeah. Just leave them in a
Then they won't be asking for them. Like, can I have an apple? It'll be like, well, you've got a banana. Stop me.
Okay, so this guest is going to be well. First of all, I'll introduce you, and he can say hello, and then I'll do a little sum up and an intro. But we've got Mr. Jim Hatcher joining us from just outside Chicago, Illinois, USA. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Great to have you back on, Jim. And for those of you who aren't watching, if you're just listening, Jim is sat like a weatherman in front of a blue screen, I think, or green screen. And he's got a quote behind him, which kind of highlights one of the things or a big theme we're going to talk about today. And it says, "The true art of living is not dying before you are dead." And that's a quote from Mr. Thomas Plummer. Now, when Jim was with us last time, it was episode 40, and the episode was called "A Lifetime of Strength." Jim is, if you haven't listened to that episode, like we always say, shame on you, go back and listen to episode 40 before you listen to this one. Would be great to listen to the background to this episode. The first episode with Jim, episode 40, A Lifetime of Strength. Jim is approaching 80. He is a fantastic guy. He is a lifelong, well, with a kind of a blip in the middle, a lifelong kind of trainer, not a trainer himself, but a lifelong exerciser, trainer in that regard. And just at the end of the episode last time we had him on, we started to talk about, or Jim referenced the mental aspects of aging. And as someone, in his late 70s now, who's been active and seeks to be active continuously throughout his life, it's a unique perspective for us to talk to Jim about that. So today's episode 55, the mental aspects of aging. So how are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing well, and I'm happy to be back and have a chance to kind of finish off what we started. I think it's important that we do talk about the mental aspects of aging, because I don't think that an older person in general, maybe anybody who trains, can be effective with the physical aspects of their training unless they've got a good mental perspective on what they're seeking to achieve. I think that accelerates with older people. That's kind of what I want to talk about.
Okay. And I think you said you'd start with the, as a springboard, use that quote that you have behind you, that the true art of living is not dying before you are dead. That's obviously something that kind of resonates with you and means something to you, I'd imagine.
Well, it kind of frames the conversation because I want to talk predominantly about from retirement, I guess, as a just sort of a springboard, but from retirement until death almost, and what you do in between. And I want to say quickly that I'm not a trainer and I'm not a physician, and some of the things that I'm going to talk about are my experience. I'd like to say they're the wisdom of age, but I hate to call myself the wisdom of age, but at the same time, it is things that I have learned along the way. It's things that I believe in. It's answers to questions that I've asked myself. It's always good to answer your own questions, by the way, because you always get an answer that's satisfactory to you. So I don't know if I'd ask these same questions to other people, but when you ask them to yourself, you get a good answer. So, so kind of I'll just launch into this if that's what you'd like.
Yeah,
me to do.
I was gonna kind of say. So what? I train a lot of older people, a lot of people who are retired now, and I think that one of the things that obviously we do globally now have an aging population, a population whose life expectancy, despite all of the things that are going on around the world, is kind of longer now than it's ever been. So that people, it was nice how you framed it up from the time you retire to the time that you die, because in the past that might have been 10 years for some people or less. I mean, obviously some people die before they retire, but if we're looking at averages, some people may retire and then have 10 years, whereas now the majority of people probably retire and have nearer 20 years, and some people 30 years and so on. So there's actually it's not just the tiny bit at the end of your life that you're talking about, is it? It's potentially decades here that we're talking about. So what kind of questions have you asked yourself that you've then answered for yourself?
Well, as I was approaching retirement, I retired because I wanted to. I mean, I was 60 years of age. I'd had a good career as both a university administrator and a businessman. And many people who retire look at the possibility of, well, I've got all this experience. I'll go out and I'll be a consultant. I'll help other people learn to do better at what I did. That's exactly what I did not want to do. I mean, if I had wanted to do that, I wouldn't have retired. I mean, I would have just kept doing it for money, and so the question is, what are you going to do with yourself? And so I started looking at options, stumbled onto a few that I'll get to in a little bit that it turned out to be pretty good. But the question was, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And in the last session, we talked about this kind of a almost mantra of eating better, sleeping better, feeling better, having more energy for your friends, your family, your activities, your avocations, and things that you choose to do with the time that you have available. So that's kind of the quest that I started out on. What are those things, and how do you get there? And there is some kind of simple arithmetic that I think is applicable to this discussion, and that arithmetic is pretty simple. There's 168 hours in every week. You're going to sleep if you sleep, which I don't very often, but if you sleep well, you might sleep 8 hours a night. So that's 56 hours you can subtract from that 168. You're going to eat. You're going to work out a little bit sometimes. I don't know what those numbers equate to, but you've got 90 or more hours a week that are left. What are you going to do with those 90 hours? And that's a big challenge. I mean, it's a challenge for you as an individual. For those of you who are trainers and are working with older people, you need to help people think through, what are you going to do for those 90 plus hours a week in addition to eating well, sleeping well, and so forth. So it takes time to find what works. You'll try some things and you won't like them. So you reject them and try something else. And all those efforts to try to find how you're going to fill those hours comes back to a mental point of view. And that's the issue for today. What is the mental perspective that you need to have in order to pick and choose those things that help keep your mind clear and healthy? And I made a comment in the last one about the fog rolling in, and as you age, there is a certain inevitability that if you don't use your mind, the fog begins to roll in. And when that fog starts to roll in an older person, it doesn't roll out easily. So what's the goal? The goal is to keep the fog from rolling in. That's my metaphor, if you will, is to keep the fog from rolling in. And it goes back to this quote: the true art of living is not dying before you're dead. So how do you avoid all that? Well, you need to do things well physically. You need to do things well mentally. You need to work on your mental acuity. How do you do that? Well, Peter there, he's with that contemplative look on his face, is probably going to live to be about 130, because he walks and he walks and he walks and he walks, and then he walks some more. And then that damn Rubik's Cube that he is working with all the time is working his mind as well. So he's doing the physical, he's doing the physical activity, he's doing the mental acuity type of things, and those are going to serve him well over time, I hope. But it's an example of what I'm talking about.
I mean, there's been a lot of reported deaths from overuse of Rubik's Cubes.
Well,
I think it's a sport not without its risks.
The thing that's going to kill me is Sean, my missus, because I've got like 8 3x3s. I've got a 4x4, a 2x2, and the odd one keeps turning up here and there. She's like, "Is that another one?" And I'm like, "Well, this one's a bit different."
Yeah, but you'll die with a
kettlebells and that as well.
So 130 might be a bit ambitious. It might be next week.
Yeah, but in any event, you'll die with a Rubik's Cube in your hand, probably. So
damn right.
So how do you fill this time frame? What do you do? Well, if you have, I don't want to call it a mindset. I don't like the word mindset, but if you have a perspective that you have established that says, I want to eat better, sleep better, and feel better, and be more active, and you commit to that kind of a global point of view, then the other decisions are easy because you've already framed the bigger picture. And if you have that bigger picture, the little choices that follow are kind of automatic. And the ones that work for you, they sort of become habits. And habits are what breed consistency and success in doing things that have a positive aspect to them, as opposed to activities that have either a less positive or maybe even a negative thing.
It's interesting.
Probably not a good. Pardon me?
I just thought I'd bring up something, because I work with a lot of people who, and I expect retirement is a very similar experience. People who make major shifts in their life, maybe they've moved from another country to the UK, or perhaps they've moved jobs to a different city, or they've split up with a partner. They've had some life event, which means that they had a set of habits that took them down one path that are no longer applicable. And then when you suddenly become retired, you go from being probably quite regimented in terms of the work hours, commute, knowing when your lunch is, knowing how much time you have in the evenings, knowing when you have to get up, to suddenly not having that structure. And you need to have that structure, but the previous structure has been established over many, many years, from when you left university or whatever. Did you have that trouble? Did you suddenly go, oh my God, I've got to create a new set of habits, or did it all just kind of follow on quite easily?
No, I'm not going to say that it was easy, because it was, it's a very good point, Paul, and it was quite a shift. And you know from our earlier conversation that some of these things about eating better, sleeping better, feeling better were things that I had failed at previously. So they weren't all new thoughts. They just became more, they were clarified for me. And the process of clarifying them is a process of experience. You try something, if it works, you don't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning anymore, but you shouldn't lay in bed until 10 o'clock in the morning. So how do you get to a point where you find an equilibrium of your new life that balances activities for you? And it's trial and error, and it's unique to every individual, and it's unique to individual circumstances and family. And the short answer to your question is that you need to be mindful. You need to spend time with, I hate this, goal-oriented behavior to sort out what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it. And it's trial and error for the most part, I think. So, no, it isn't easy unless you have a perspective. And if you have that perspective, then you just make choices. Some of them are good choices and some are bad choices. And some of them are hard to build consistency with. If you go to a restaurant and the waitress or waiter says to you, "May I bring you the dessert menu?" If you've got a point of view, a perspective, and a good set of habits, you'll probably say, "No, thank you, bring the bill." Or if it's a special occasion, you might say, "This is when I'm going to eat that great big piece of cheesecake." Well, that's fine if that's what you're going to do. But if your perspective is, "I'm going to do it on occasion," you're okay. If you succumb to the "May I bring you the menu" every single time, that's something you need to evaluate. Is it working or is it not? So I don't know if that's a good example, but it's the personal type of thing that you have to ask yourself. And if you've got the context in which to ask, you know what the answer is going to be. So
what gives you that?
Did you find yourself? Oh, go on, James.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask Jim. So that context, that kind of overview, I suppose we've spoke about it a lot on the podcast before. Is kind of like a values-driven kind of context, whereby you're coming up now then to 20 years having been retired from sort of 60 to 80. When you started your retirement, was there a kind of a goal? What was the theme or the goal for this period of your life? Because you sound like you're a very measured, thoughtful, calculating person, and I know you are. So you must have kind of sat back and thought, right, my retirement now, it could be 20, 30 years. It's a big chunk of time. What am I gonna I know you mentioned trying to generate some habits and trying to fill the time meaningfully. But kind of what was your perspective when you retired as opposed to maybe now 20 years into your retirement?
What am I going to do with all this time that's different from everything that I had done before as a businessman and an administrator? I wanted to walk away from that. And boy, believe me, I have. And I sent you a picture of one of my avocations. In my late 50s, I was having a discussion about what might I do in retirement, and I saw an advertisement for a large county sheriff's office that said, we're looking for older people to serve as volunteers. Well, I was already looking for something to do, and I thought, well, boy, that'll be as different as anything I've ever done in my life. So I went to a meeting. I retired from that job this past April. So I've been there almost 27 years, 27 years. It was an avocation. It started out as just a time filler, and it turned out I liked it. I grew into it. I assumed a great deal of responsibility and walked away feeling like I had done some good there. That led to, because we had a summer home at the time, my working at another department in northern Michigan, a very small department, when we were there. And I worked there for 5 months a year for 15 summers. So that was my time filler, and it filled a lot of time. It was very different. It was an avocation. I have some hobbies. I have some continuing new interests that I think, a couple of things I'm working on now that are a little bit different, but they all come from this basic premise that I keep coming back to: eating better, sleeping better, feeling better, and having more energy. And if you don't have active mental activities, you're going to sit down. And if you sit down, you're probably not going to get back up. If you spend your time watching soap operas every afternoon, that's just not good. I mean, in my opinion, it's just not good. So the picture that I'm painting is a personal picture. It's things that I have found to do, that I like to do, that have worked for me. But there was trial and error in getting there. There was another volunteer job that I started. I lasted 1 day. It was the worst thing I'd ever done in my life. It was just horrible. I went into it with a good, positive attitude, thought this is going to be great. Went through 1 day of training, showed up for the job the next day, lasted about an hour, went up and quit. Because I knew immediately it wasn't.
What was that job? Can you tell us, Jim? Or
Well, yeah, I can tell you. I took a job at a large hospital, a volunteer job, to work in the emergency room. I thought that fits with other things I've been doing. It'll be challenging. It'll be active and interesting. And so the first day I was on my own, and I'm going to kind of make up the details just to make the point. The woman who was sort of the administrator of the emergency room to keep things flowing said, you need to take the patient in 14 for a CAT scan. I said, okay. Now the CAT scan is down the hall, through the door, on the left, and about 100 yards down on the right. Is that correct? She looked at me and she said, if you don't know where to take these patients when I ask you to, you are not going to do us any good down here. That was my first day. That was also my last hour.
And you were volunteering there to help.
Yeah, right.
To help. Yeah, you know. Oh.
So I thought, well, I'm not going to get along very well with her very often. So, so that's what I meant earlier. You try some things, you reject some things, and
yeah. But I think you doing the sheriff work that you did, it's far more than a time filler, isn't it? It's actually it's giving purpose to your time, and it's actually giving back, and it's serving the community. It's doing good. It's very different, and gives you the opportunity to learn and expand and develop yourself. But that's a very community orientated pursuit, isn't it, of your time, which I think is always also a big thing.
they were all positive experiences. They're all experiences that I felt good about. They were, for the most part, experiences that derived from 3 half days a week or more. And they were with younger people for the most part, which I thought was good for me. I hope in return it was good for some of them. Some of the things that I worked on were very, very enjoyable. Some of them were very difficult, mentally difficult for me. I spent some time in computer forensics, which can have some pretty nasty aspects to it. The last year that I was there, I spent nearly full time training officers on how to, what was necessary in anticipation of them losing their life in the line of duty. It's not easy to talk to 25 to 40-year-old men and women about what could happen if they were killed in the line of duty. What is their obligation to their families? Who do you want notified by whom? How are your parents going to be told? How is your spouse going to be told? How are your children who live with your ex-spouse going to be told? Does an ambulance need to be staged in the event that the notification has a catastrophic effect on somebody? What about your personal accounts? What do your parents and your spouse maybe don't know about passwords? I mean, on and on and on. Those are very difficult conversations. And in addition, you have to prepare policies and guidelines for the command staff, because they're going to be overwhelmed with activity for the next 72 hours, and there better be a plan in place to manage that. Well, that's a long answer, but that brought value to what I was doing. It brought value to the department. Reluctantly, for many, it brought value to those individuals who had to think about things. And as a 78, 79-year-old person, I just might have been the best person available to do that. So I don't know.
It's interesting, though, you brought up a point about spending time with different people in different generations, because we can be very stratified, I think, in society now, where, and particularly with everyone remote working, I think that would probably be a major issue, is that you don't learn from someone who's got a lot of experience. You're not just around people and their demeanor, because someone who's been in a job for a very long time is going to approach stressful events in a far different way to someone who's very new, or perhaps have never experienced much in life because they're, extremely young. And obviously someone who's older, the energy and the enthusiasm and the willingness to learn and the maybe the kind of ability to pick things up quickly that someone younger will have will rub off. So it seems to me, particularly in our last conversation, you spend a lot of time learning from people, different age groups, not really kind of going in with much prejudiced thinking. You do strike me as someone with an open mind.
Well, I like being around other generations of people. I learn from them. But while I rejected almost in my opening comment, the wisdom of age, I think the breadth of experience that I had in many areas, not directly related to law enforcement, some acquired over time, were helpful to a lot of people. That's a tough job. And sometimes, not sometimes, often, people in the law enforcement community don't have others to turn to. They don't want to take it home. People need to understand their job, and most people don't. And I wouldn't call myself a mentor, because I wasn't really trained to be a mentor, but I would say I was a resource to younger people because of age and experience. I don't know if that responds to what you're asking, but
what I love about all that is what I've got from pretty much everything you've just said in like up until now on this podcast is all of those labels that are given to things. So you've mentioned mindset, you've mentioned being goal orientated, you've mentioned the wisdom of age, and all like mentor, because I was about to write down mentor as well, and I haven't. But all those things are labels that people are either given or they give themselves, right? Especially in the internet age, don't they? Like, I've got the wisdom of this and that and blah, blah. And it's all about mindset, and it's all this. Those are all labels you can give to things. But if you can't demonstrate that you do them to other people, then they don't mean anything, do they? People can use them all they like. But what you do and what you have done is you have mentored these people, you have shown them the wisdom of age and all of that. You've shown them all these things which have got these labels, but you don't care about those labels. You're like, this is how I live. This is what I do. This is what I want to show you. And there's more in that than there is in explaining it, what it is and what you call it. It's like, it doesn't matter what you call it. This is how you live it. And if you can do that, if you can show people that and you can get that across to people, that's why I go walking a lot and I use my Rubik's Cube and I tell everyone about it, because it's like, it's dead easy. Well, it's not easy, but you know what I mean? It's easy to go walking, but it's like, if you can do that, it's, you're doing all right. And I think that's brilliant. So, why don't you like all these? Why don't you like those labels? Actually, I'm interested to know that, because I don't either. So I'm interested to
because they set a stereotype mentality, and mindset. Why do I not like it? I don't know. I call it perspective. Is there a difference between a mindset and a perspective? Hell, I don't know. But for me, it's a better word. And I can't defend it. It's just a better word. And my purpose in using perspective is that it allows you to make better choices if you've got a solid perspective. And we talked about that. So, yeah. Is it a mindset? I don't know. Maybe it is, but I'm not going to call it that.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, who's to say what fits into a particular remit anyway? I mean, look, there are disciplines out there that, none of us should be doctors.
Right.
But many years ago, before you had the professional versions of most of the disciplines we have now, you had these amateur enthusiasts who we still regard today. Darwin wasn't an officially a scientist. I think he was like an amateur enthusiast in the natural sciences. And you end up exploring with a different kind of perspective, I think, when you don't label yourself. It's just like saying, all I am is a strength and conditioning coach. All I do is this. All I do is that. All I do is nutrition. And it's not really that simple. I mean, otherwise I would have boxed myself into ever smaller things. And I often come across professionals who are very boxed in their thinking because they are just within their discipline and they don't really explore outside that, particularly if I'm referring people to other professionals, and sometimes that's not what a client needs. And it's also not very, I think it doesn't serve you well in life.
Well, you certainly don't want to be boxed in anywhere, do you? Because that's
Not if I can
exactly what
help
Jim
it.
Court says.
Not unless you're in a nightclub. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about a couple quick other things too, and that is going back to this utilizing your time. Indian clubs. Why do you use Indian clubs? Well, the first thing that you guys think about probably is mobility and shoulder strength and on and on and on. That's not what I think. I think mental discipline. I think it's not banging the damn things into one another. It's not pinching my fingers in the bad place. It's using my mind to develop a pattern that works well. Sure, is it ultimately going to help with mobility? Yeah, and flexibility and whatever. Yeah, it probably is. But I don't aspire to be Dr. Ed Thomas. I aspire to not hurting myself, but spending 10, 20 minutes in deep, focused, mental concentration, trying to get a pattern perfect. That's the way I would look at it. Is that the only way to look at it? No, I mean, but that's my goal. My goal is not to continue to get bigger and bigger mells or whatever those things are and swing them around. And I've never used a mace. I know James, you're into the mace, but I think so much of that is good mental activity. It helps keep the fog from rolling in. It's hand-eye coordination. It's mental focus and concentration. So what am I doing now besides everything? So I'm taking lessons to fly radio-controlled airplanes. Why in the world would a guy my age be interested in radio-controlled airplanes? The same reason as Indian clubs, except I'm outdoors, mental focus, hand-eye coordination. It's mental. It's mental for me. I'm not going to buy great big radio-controlled jets. I got a little foam thing that I'm learning very basically, but it's visual. I mean, it's all good things. Where'd that come from? I don't know. So
And
what are
do
some other?
you also, is there also a social component to that as well? Are you teaching yourself, or are you learning from someone else? Do you go to a club? I mean, what's the format for your learning for that?
I got a 72-year-old instructor. A young little whippersnapper is teaching me to fly airplanes. And he's been doing it for 30 years. He's a great teacher. But these people that do these things are in clubs, and I'm meeting new people. There's a common interest. It's a subject that I don't know very much about. So, everybody wants to try to help me and teach me things, and I'm certainly open to learning all of it. So it goes back to what I said in the very beginning. You pick an activity, you think it might do something you like, something good for you. This one's working out. There are other things that I've done that haven't worked out quite so well, but you keep trying till you find something that fits and fits for you.
Do you
I'll show you a couple.
actively, I was going to ask Jim, do you actively seek out skills and pursuits and pastimes that have you've mentioned obviously the mental aspect of the concentration and keeping the fog away and that sort of thing, but a lot of these pursuits that you've taken up have a physical component as well as the the mental component as well. So when you're looking for something to learn, do you look for something that, like Indian clubs, like you say, has a very physical component as well as the mental acuity as well? Do you actively seek out those things that kind of tick off multiple boxes at the same time?
I'm going to answer that by saying perhaps. And the perhaps is when you've got 60 years of physical activity behind you, you just almost automatically gravitate in that direction. So I wouldn't say it's been that conscious. It's just, if you're going to end up doing something you like, if it's coming from a base that's already there, which is a physical base, I would say I haven't actively sought that because I've been looking for the mental, but the arena in which I've looked is physical, whether it's outdoors, or whatever it is. It just comes from that because that's what I've done. That's all I know. You want to see a couple of failures of the choices?
Yeah. Okay.
I got into buying and selling flashlights because I thought that buying, selling, and trading, because I thought the social aspect of it was going to be really exciting. And it was something that they're kind of like a cult almost, to people who do that. So I got to buying and selling little teeny flashlights like this. Can you see that?
A torch.
Yeah, well, it's just a little one.
Yeah, we call them torches. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also had some great big ones.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
okay. Yeah. That's like
All
a
right,
mag.
there we
It's like
go.
a mag light type thing. Is that what it's called?
Well, this is a lot bigger than a mag light.
Right, okay.
There's like a little one.
Know your stuff, James.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. James and his torch-based knowledge. This is
Showing a hole.
you.
So I was about 50% effective at that, and got kind of tired of going to the post office and mailing these off to people and then trading and things. So I decided enough of that. So now I'm buying and selling knives, big ones and little ones.
And
That's a lot more.
can you just pop to the post office and post them, or is it a bit more?
Well,
just
these
a bit
go
more
in
careful?
smaller boxes. It's a lot easier. So
Just put them in a jiffy bag.
Just to clarify, though, Jim's in America, right? So you're allowed to
Yeah.
do that over there. You wouldn't be
Right.
allowed to do that over here. So don't get any ideas, anybody.
Yeah.
but it's for the social aspect. And, again, they're kind of conscious decisions. The older I get, the maybe less able I am to do some of the more physical kinds of things. But I'm not going to give up on the mental. So buying and selling and trading and negotiating with others is a social aspect that's mental. Defending your pricing and it's fun. So I'm not doing the law enforcement anymore. I'm working on airplanes. I'm buying and selling knives and trading and negotiating, and I'm not sitting in the chair, back to the metaphor, letting the fog roll in.
Yep.
And I do it on my own terms and my own time.
There's an interesting thing I heard. You've got a Thomas Plummer quote above you there. I think I heard this from Thomas Plummer as well, but I can't be sure. But anyway, it's about how, and I did this when I was younger. I finished university, got a job, and just tried to make as much money as possible so then I could retire early and do nothing, right? Which is what people are after, aren't they? Like it seems to be what people are after. But who sits around, and it exactly goes with that quote that you got behind you. Who sits around and does nothing? People want to end up on a beach on a sun lounger, just baking away in the sun. But who else sits around doing nothing, lying still? Dead people, And it's like people seem to want to retire and do nothing, and it's like, no, that's the ultimate end. That you don't want to get to that. You want to, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, then you can use your time wisely and do lots of things like you said, and develop skills and help people and do things that are going to be for the greater good.
I suppose you've got to be able to see activity as somehow relaxing, because if you've spent all your life doing a job, getting in, showing up week after week, month after month, that kind of constant rat race. We all feel like it. Even I run my own business, so sometimes I'm just like, how do I get off the treadmill for just a few weeks to just calm down a bit? that you just want to just stop all of that. But actually, the solution doesn't seem, from what you're saying, Jim, to just stop. It's to say, what happens if you just carried on being, you've just got to keep being active, but you've got to just see activity as something that's nourishing, as something that's fulfilling, rather than something that's draining. And I think often people just see it as a black and white binary thing. I'm either on and then I'm off, or you know, and you're saying actually you're just always on. You're just doing it in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do for 90 hours a week? You know, and scenario A for you, off of the treadmill can be considered stressful. You know, I've done this so long. How am I going to get off this metaphorical businessman treadmill? Well, that doesn't mean you don't use the time. The time's available. It means, you said fulfilling, I would have said enjoyable. Both, I mean, it's back to semantics again. You can't, I don't know why people just sit down, you know, and it's because they haven't thought about maybe what they want to do when they retire. All they've thought about is, I'm rejecting what I've done all these years and I want to end it.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy to me. That's a prescription for physically and mentally deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal, there you go, using that word again, the goal is to not deteriorate any faster than is probably inevitable. If you can delay the inevitable as long as possible and do it in a fulfilling way, I think you win that way. I mean,
what do you think about, because I like to use, and I use this for myself as well, and somebody said this to me ages ago, and I took it on board. And it was, you know, what would you do in your retirement, right? So you've got your life, your work, and all of that, and then that ends. Not your life, but your work ends. What are you going to do in your retirement? And people will be like, oh well, you know, and they might have a little idea of the things they like doing and they want to do, and it's like, right, okay, why can't you do some of that now, or if not all of it now, just not as much as you're going to do in your retirement? Which is why I go out walking and all of that, because, like, you know, that's what when I retire, I want to be active, and I want to keep my mind active, and I want to, you know, I want to try and give back and all of that sort of stuff. So I mean, what do you like? What do you think about that? Because I mean, from the previous podcast we did, you said, you know, you worked really hard and you stopped doing physical activity for a number of years and all that, and you wish you hadn't, but you know, it happened and all of that. But if you could go back and do it again, so if you could go back and do it again, what would you do differently to kind of add in some of the things you're doing now in your retirement, or are you happy with what you did?
For the most part, I loved every job I ever had.
That's lucky. That's good.
I'm kind of a guy who throws himself 100% into most things that I do. And the difference, in a way, is that I did it for remuneration before, and now I don't have to do that. And I talked about mentoring. You mentioned mentoring. Some of the things that I've done in law enforcement are mentoring. The things I did as a businessman with my employees was mentoring. I mean, it's applying some of the same mental skills now that I applied in my work life. So the goals were different, the strategies were different, but the self-fulfilling concept, I guess, would be kind of the same thing. So I don't know that I would, other than not taking 15 years off from lifting weights, I don't know that I would have done necessarily anything different. It wasn't, every item of my career wasn't planned. A lot of it was fortuitous. But in retirement, everything I've done wasn't planned either. It's just been evaluated, and some things I could accept and some things I could reject. In the world of work, sometimes you have to do some things you'd rather reject, but you can't. So no, I hadn't thought about that. As a good question, but no, I don't think I would have done much different work-wise.
That's really good, because I love that you've said that, because that's what I want to be able to say when I'm your age, right? I want to be able to say, and when I'm your age, I'll still have another 50 years left to live, according to you. So I better start earning some more money now, don't I? Because that's I've got another 90 years left, or 86 years. But anyway, I want to get like, I think about this a lot, and we've talked to Dan John and we've talked to Stuart Gill, who said, what does it look like in 20 years? When everything you're doing now, what does it look like in 20 years' time? And I really take that on board, and I think about that a lot. And like I say, I want to get to your age and say, do you know what? I might have regretted some stuff when I was younger than I am now, but actually, I wouldn't change anything from them, because I did it all for what I thought were the right reasons, and not necessarily for me, not necessarily for whatever. It was for the kind of the greater good. That's the way I look at things, and I think it's a great place to be able to look back and say, I did everything I could, and I love that. I love that you've got that, and you can see it in you as well when you're talking. You're just very, you're very relaxed, and you're very kind of content. I'd use the word. I think that's a great word, and that's because people strive to be happy, and people strive for freedom, and they strive for this and that. And content is just great because it's kind of balanced, and just that's how you come across to me. It's great.
I was just going to ask Jim, I mean, one of the things that I kind of have really picked up from today is the first episode we talked about back in episode 40 about the lifetime of strength and the importance of being active throughout your life, and trying not to have gaps. And we spoke about the gap that you had and the fact that you've just regretted that gap. But I think it would be very, very difficult for most people to get to retirement if they've never had a physical or active component in their life, like many people don't, and then retire and suddenly do a 180 do a 180, and suddenly they embrace some form of activity or some form of exercise and things. So I think really what you're talking about is it's the importance of trying to put some of these habits in place earlier, so that they are, by the time you get to retirement, just a part of your life and natural. Because I think if someone gets to 60, 65, 70 with no history of activity or physicality in their life, the chances and the likelihood of them adopting it at that stage, I'd imagine is, well, from experience, I think is incredibly low. Would you agree with that?
I do. I was looking through some things in anticipation of today, and I found a kind of a tongue-in-cheek contract that I wrote that would be between a trainer and an older person. And it spells out each person's responsibilities in the relationship. And one of the responsibilities is you, the trainer, will help me prepare for the time when I retire. And it's exactly the point that you just made. And I'm sure I wrote it at that time thinking just what you said. You can't just flip a switch the day you retire. You have to have been working towards something. Doc Hartle, Doc Hartle? Doc Hartle
Yes.
says,
Yep.
You plan the work and you work the plan. Well, that's kind of important too. You know, you got to be headed in a direction. You got to be prepared to head in that direction. And then once you start, you got to do it. And this didn't exactly go where I thought it might today, but the fundamental bow that goes on the package is that you've got to be mentally active, doing things that you enjoy in a way in which you enjoy them, and that lead to you eating better, sleeping better, feeling better, and having more energy. And the world is wide open in the kinds of things that you can find that might meet that criteria for you as an individual. You find some that work, the sheriff's office. You find some that don't work, the emergency room. You find some things that keep you busy, that work, selling knives and trading and so forth, and some that don't work, flashlights. And those for you are individual, but you got to keep at it. And if we're close to a finishing time, I'm going to come right back to the quote: "The true art of living is not dying before you're dead." And dying to me means letting that fog roll in. And you can't do that. You can't let the fog roll in. Otherwise, what do you have to live for? And I guess that's my grand finale, I guess, is that it's self-driven, it's personal motivation, it's personal fulfillment, it's finding, Peter, contentment, but you do it by exploring. And you don't necessarily fail if something doesn't work. You just reject it and try to find something else to fill that void. And that void is those 90 hours a week. If you don't fill those 90 hours, not all of them, but some of them, with meaningful activities, I don't know what you've got to look forward to.
Jim, that's absolutely that's brilliant, the way you've kind of brought that round and looped back round to the start and kind of wrap that up for us. Pete, do you have anything you'd like to say, or any thoughts to kind of to finish off with us?
No, I really like that. It's keep your mind active. That's, I mean, obviously, you know, we're all trainers and we talk about being physical and stuff like that. But that's easy. You just go for a walk. But keeping your mind active is really tricky. It really is, in a meaningful way as well. You know, so and I love. I mean, I'm a maths guy, so my thing is doing things. You know, like when Jim said about Indian clubs, my thing is doing things with that, with different things with each arm as I go, because it splits my brain up, and that's how my brain works. And other people are a bit more creative, and they might go and try and make more things up or whatever. It doesn't matter how you might, because it doesn't matter how your mind works. You know, you can be mathematical, you can be creative, you can be whatever. Just use it in that way. And as long as you're using your mind, then, you know, the benefits are huge. It gives you things to talk about as well.
Mr. Paul Bassett, do you have any questions or thoughts?
Two, really. The first one is, what I'm hoping that the knife community uses as their mantra is, do you call that a knife? And then they put it. That's what I'm hoping, as they put it. But anyway, got to get that in there. And then I'll leave you with well, I suppose it's a famous poem by a UK kind of institution, sadly no longer with us. I'm a lone wolf ligger, but I ain't no pretty boy. I'm a backbone shiver. I'm a bundle of joy. But I don't make no difference, because I ain't gonna be easy. The only time I'm easy when I'm killed by death. someone killed by death. Lemmy Motorhead.
Three.
There we go. Killed by death.
Okay.
I'm also glad when you're talking about Jim selling knives. I'm also glad he said he was selling flashlights and not fleshlights. But anyway, we'll not go there.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, Jim, yeah, like I mentioned, I think a take home from maybe people who may be listening, although I'm probably, pretty sure most of our listeners now, we're kind of almost preaching to the converted. But I have so many conversations with people, maybe in their 40s or 50s or even 60s. And most people just don't realize how hard it is to get started the older you get, and people in their 40s think they can put it off to their 50s, and people in their 50s think they can put it off to their 60s. And I think you've really highlighted the importance of starting on the path to being more active and more healthy and having some more positive habits and a more healthy lifestyle. The earlier you can adopt that, the better you're setting yourself up for good habits and for longevity and the kind of a good life as you get older. So thank you so much, Jim, for joining us again. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really glad that the lightning and the bad weather you've been having there didn't scupper our podcast today with Wi-Fi. Do you have anything? You wrapped up what you said brilliantly, actually, with your final thought. But thanks so much, Jim, for coming on. It's been a pleasure again.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I've made 3 new friends through this. So I'm
Absolutely.
It's been a good experience for me, and I appreciate the invitation. And hopefully we'll get some good feedback and a lot of listeners, and it's a message that will resonate not only with people, but early enough with people that, as you say, that they start thinking about it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jim. So, and I just want to thank all the listeners for us. We are now obviously we're into our 2nd year now. This is episode 55. So I really want to heartfelt thank all the listeners every month. The kind of downloads are going up at the moment. So please do continue to like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're listening on a platform that allows you to do so. If you'd like to join the Facebook group, just go onto Facebook and search in groups for Health Oddity. And Jim is within the Health Oddity group as well. So if you want to correspond directly with Jim in the group, you can do. And we've also got Mr. Chris Denning in the group. Previous guests. We'll invite actually some other guests to join the group as well, I think, soon. But yeah, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with episode 56. Thank you and goodbye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.